So imagine you're a scientist, right? Your boss walks into the lab, hands you a clipboard, and just says, I need you to measure happiness. Go.
Good luck with that. Where do you even begin?
Exactly. Like, do you just walk into a room and ask people if they're happy? Do you count how many times they smile in an hour? Or do you hook them up to a machine?
Right. It's a completely subjective thing.
Yeah, but then you read a headline that says something like, study proves coffee makes you happier. And it sounds so incredibly simple.
It really does. But the reality of turning a messy human emotion into a hard, cold number is, well, it's anything but simple.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We're pulling back the curtain on the foundational methods of quantitative research.
And it is a transformative process to understand, especially for you as a listener. Grasping these building blocks is just essential right now.
Because we live in a world that is absolutely saturated with data and statistics, right?
Oh, completely. Supposedly objective facts are everywhere. But if you don't understand the hidden mechanisms behind how that data was gathered, I mean, you are completely at the mercy of whoever wrote the headline.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because most of us, we picture science as this very sterile, objective thing. Lab coats, beakers, perfectly precise rulers.
But when you're studying human beings, you can't just put happiness on a scale and weigh it.
Right. You literally have to invent the ruler first.
And that brings us to the very first and arguably the most crucial step of any research study. You have to distinguish between a concept and a variable.
Okay, break that down for us.
So in our daily lives, we communicate using concepts all the time. Things like student success, poverty, depression, consumer behavior.
They're abstract ideas, like they represent a general phenomenon.
Exactly. But as a researcher, you cannot measure a concept. It is way too loose. Before you can collect a single piece of data, you have to translate that abstract concept into a variable.
And a variable is, well, just by its definition, it's something that varies. It's a characteristic you can actually observe and measure in different amounts.
Right, and the concrete process of making that translation, deciding exactly what steps you will take to measure that concept, that is called operationalization.
Operationalization. It's a big word, but to put that into everyday terms for you listening, say, I want to study what makes a good movie.
The concept is good movie.
Right, the concept is good movie. But how do I operationalize it?
Yeah.
Am I looking at the financial variable of box office ticket sales?
Or maybe the critical variable, like Rotten Tomatoes scores.
Yeah. Or, am I literally sitting in the back of the theater with a clicker, counting the physical tears falling from the audience's eyes?
Depending on which operational definition you choose, a massive action blockbuster might look like a cinematic masterpiece in one study.
And an absolute failure in another.
Exactly. Which highlights this really vital mechanism in science. The way you choose to operationalize your concept entirely constructs the reality of your findings.
Oh, wow. That's a heavy thought.
It is. And the text provides a really powerful case study on this dynamic from researcher Sean R. Harper.
Right, the study on Black male college students.
Yes. So Harper examined decades of research surrounding Black male college students. And for a long time, the academic landscape was completely dominated by what is known as deficit framing.
Deficit framing, meaning the researchers were conceptualizing the college experience purely through a lens of struggle, right? Or failure.
Precisely. They conceptualized the experience around negative outcomes. And because of that concept, they operationalized their variables to measure deficits.
So what kind of things were they asking?
They asked questions like, why do they disagree with campus administrators? Or why don't they participate in out-of-class activities?
Wow.
Yeah. And the variables they physically measured were things like dropout rates, negative peer influences, academic deficiencies.
Well, if you only build tools to measure failure, then failure is literally the only story your data can possibly tell.
You're mathematically blinding yourself to anything else.
Right, you're missing the whole picture.
So Harper recognized this structural flaw, and he flipped the paradigm completely. He applied an asset-based framing.
So he wanted to conceptualize success and achievement instead.
Yes, and to do that, he had to operationalize his variables completely differently. He asked, how are post-secondary aspirations cultivated?
Okay, so he's looking at the positives.
Right. He explicitly looked at students who had GPAs above a 3.0. But even more than just grades, He measured meaningful, value-added relationships with faculty. He measured active participation in campus leadership.
Wait, how do you even mathematically measure a meaningful relationship, though? That sounds incredibly tricky to pin down.
It requires deep operationalization. So you might measure the frequency of office hour visits or, the number of mentorship programs a student is enrolled in.
Oh, sure.
Or even survey responses rating the quality of faculty interactions on a scale.
So by changing the operational definition from a deficit model to an asset model, Harper captured this completely different, overwhelmingly positive reality.
A reality that the previous studies literally could not see.
That just blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's the exact same overarching topic, right?
Yeah.
Black male college students. But because they operationalized the variables differently, they essentially studied two different universes.
It proves that data is never just neutral data. The numbers you ultimately get are bound by the definitions you created before the study even began.
But, okay, once Harper figured out what to measure, he hit another wall, didn't he? Because measuring a GPA is fairly straightforward. It's a number. But how do you categorize these different types of measurements?
Right, because the math completely changes based on the category of your variable.
Yeah, so break down the categories for us.
Well, at the most fundamental level, researchers divide the world into categorical variables and continuous variables.
Okay.
Categorical variables place things into distinct buckets, and within that you have nominal variables, which have no inherent mathematical order.
Right. The word nominal just means name. You're literally just naming the categories.
Exactly. For example, the U.S. state where you were born, or a person's eye color.
And the mechanism here is that you can't do traditional math on nominal variables, right? Like, you cannot find the average of Texas and California.
No, you can't. You can only count frequencies, like how many people are in each bucket.
Got it. Okay, what's next?
Then you move slightly up the complexity ladder to ordinal variables. These are still distinct categories, but they have a ranked logical order.
Okay, like what?
Think of a standard survey asking you to rate your overall health as excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor. There is a clear hierarchy there.
Right, but the catch is that the distance between those categories isn't a precise measurement. I mean, the difference between good health and fair health might mean a slight cough for one person.
Get a chronic backache for another.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not a standardized unit, like the distance between 2 inches and 3 inches on a ruler.
Which brings us perfectly to continuous variables. Yes. Continuous variables can be measured along a continuum with exact, clearly defined, equal intervals. These are your interval and ratio variables.
So things like temperature in degrees Celsius or your grade point average.
For a person's height, yeah. The distance between 10 degrees and 20 degrees is mathematically identical to the distance between 30 degrees and 40 degrees.
And because those intervals are exact, you are fully authorized to use complex calculus and statistics to analyze them.
That's right.
Okay, so we have our concepts defined, we've turned them into variables, and we know what mathematical category they fit into. Now we want to see how these variables interact with one another.
We want to find the cause and the effect.
Yes. Yeah. This brings us to the independent variable and the dependent variable. And the easiest way to think about this for you listening is that the independent variable is the strong independent factor that does whatever it wants. It is the cause.
And the dependent variable is simply reacting to it. It is the effect.
Its outcome depends entirely on what the independent variable did.
The independent variable is the presumed cause, and the dependent variable is the presumed effect. The text illustrates this with a really compelling look at a welfare training experiment.
Oh, right. Walk us through that one.
So imagine researchers want to determine if a new government job training program actually helps people on welfare secure employment. But they also want to know if providing extra support makes a difference.
Right, but they can't just give everyone the exact same treatment, or they wouldn't have anything to compare it to. So how do they split them up?
They divide the participants into 4 distinct groups. Group 1 receives the job training, plus financial support for childcare, plus money for transportation.
Okay, the worst.
Right. Group 2 receives the training and childcare money, but no transportation funds. Group 3 gets the training and transport money, but no childcare support.
And Group 4?
Group 4 just gets the job training with no extra financial help at all.
So in that scenario, the researchers are actively manipulating the level of financial support. That makes the financial support, the childcare and transport money, the independent variable.
Exactly. They are changing it to see what happens.
And the dependent variable, the outcome they're waiting to measure, is the actual job obtaining rate for each group. They want to see if manipulating the independent variable causes a shift in the dependent variable.
That is the goal of the experiment.
I have to push back on this terminology a bit, though.
Oh.
Yeah, calling it absolute cause and effect feels, I don't know,
Oh.
really bold. I mean, wait, real life isn't a science lab. If group one, the group with all the extra money, gets the most jobs, does that definitively prove the childcare money caused it?
What do you mean?
What if group one just coincidentally contained people who were naturally more charismatic in job interviews? Like, is an independent variable always a strict cause, or is it sometimes just a heavy clue?
That is an incredibly astute pushback, and you are actually highlighting a major debate in research methodology right there. Yes. Because in a perfectly controlled laboratory experiment, where you can isolate every single factor, researchers do try to claim definitive cause and effect.
Okay, sure, in a lab.
But outside of that strict environment, in non-experimental studies observing the messy real world, researchers must be exceedingly careful with their language.
Right.
They often refer to the independent variable as the predictor variable and the dependent variable as the outcome variable. You are predicting an outcome based on a strong clue rather than claiming an absolute, undeniable law of physics.
Because human beings are unpredictable. We aren't chemicals in a beaker that react the exact same way every single time you mix them.
Not at all.
And that unpredictability introduces the invisible saboteurs of any research study, which are confounding variables.
Confounding variables are the absolute bane of a researcher's existence.
So a confound is basically an extra hidden variable that sneaks into your study, influences your dependent variable, and creates a completely false impression about what is actually driving your results.
Sounds like the perfect way to describe it.
Let's ground this for the listener because the history of how we discovered these confounds is fascinating. Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about the last time you were at work, maybe typing an email or browsing a website, and your boss suddenly walked up and stood right behind your chair.
Oh, I know this feeling.
Right. What happened? Your posture straightened up, you started typing at 100 words a minute, and you looked intensely focused.
You didn't do it consciously, but your behavior radically changed simply because you were being observed.
Exactly. And that is the Hawthorne effect.
It's a classic phenomenon. Decades ago, industrial psychology researchers went to the Western Electric plant in Hawthorne, Illinois.
To study the workers.
Yes, their independent variable was the lighting in the factory, and their dependent variable was worker productivity. They turned the lights up to see if it would help.
And let me guess, productivity went up.
It did.
So, brighter lights equal harder workers. Case closed.
Well, to verify their findings, they then turned the lights down. They made the factory significantly dimmer.
And what happened?
To their absolute shock, productivity went up again.
Wait, really?
Yes. The lighting had nothing to do with it. The confounding variable was the presence of the researchers themselves.
Oh, wow.
The workers were reacting to the clipboards and the observation, fundamentally altering the very reality the researchers were trying to measure.
That is wild. And there is another confound in the text that is just as human and, frankly, petty, called the John Henry effect.
Oh, this one is great.
Picture yourself playing a video game against a younger sibling. If you tell them you're using the upgraded professional controller and they are stuck with the broken, cheap one, they aren't just going to play normally.
No, they'll try incredibly hard, almost out of spite, to beat you just to prove a point.
Exactly. Their sheer willpower and competitiveness become a confounding variable.
The John Henry effect is named after the American folk hero who worked himself to death trying to beat a steam drill. It happens when the control group realizes they are not receiving the special new treatment.
They figure out they're the underdogs.
Right. They realize they are the inferior baseline group, so instead of acting normally, they actively try to outperform the experimental group out of pride.
But what about the internal confounds? The text mentions the placebo effect and demand characteristics, which seem even harder to control because they happen entirely inside the participant's mind.
They are incredibly difficult to control. The placebo effect is a stunning example of the mind-body connection ruining a clean data set.
Right, like sugar pills.
Yes. If you give a participant a sugar pill but tell them it is a powerful painkiller, their expectation of healing is so strong that their brain will actually release real endorphins to kill the pain.
So the dependent variable, their pain level, changes, but not because of the independent variable you thought you were testing.
Exactly.
And demand characteristics are basically the people-pleaser syndrome of science.
That's a great way to put it. Human beings are deeply social creatures. When we are in a study, we instinctively try to figure out what the researcher wants from us.
We want to give them the right answer.
Right.
Demand characteristics occur when participants guess the hypothesis of the study and then subconsciously or consciously alter their behavior to confirm that hypothesis and please the investigator.
It's like going to a dinner party where the host cooks an incredibly dry, terrible roast. When they ask you how it is, you don't give them objective data.
You read the room.
Yeah. You figure out they want validation. You say, oh, it's delicious. I mean, humans are terrible test subjects. We act differently when watched. We get spiteful if we're in the control group. We heal ourselves with sugar pills. And we lie to make the researcher happy.
It is a bit of a mess.
So how on earth do scientists actually measure internal traits accurately when we are this messy?
It requires immense creativity. Because you cannot just ask a single straightforward question and expect unfiltered truth, researchers use composite measures.
Okay, composite measures.
When trying to measure a complex characteristic, like a person's level of extroversion or their attitude toward education, you need multiple indicators woven together to form a safety net against those human quirks. Which brings us to the Likert scale. Every single person listening to this has taken one of these.
Definitely.
You read a statement, and you have to select an option on a continuum ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. It essentially forces a subjective feeling into a quantifiable numerical bracket.
But to bypass that people-pleaser instinct, or just the sheer laziness of a participant checking the strongly agree box down the entire page to finish the survey faster, researchers deploy a mechanism called reverse scoring.
Oh man, I have absolutely fallen into this trap before.
It is a brilliant structural defense. If a researcher is measuring positive attitudes toward a company, most statements will be phrased positively.
Like, I feel valued at work, or I enjoy my daily tasks.
Exactly. But buried in the middle, they will insert a negatively phrased statement. Something like, I feel overwhelmed and unsupported by management.
Ah, okay. So if a participant is just mindlessly clicking, strongly agree for every single question,
their answers will mathematically contradict each other. The reverse scored item acts as an alarm bell, flagging the data as corrupted so the researcher can just throw it out.
that handles attitudes and feelings.
Yeah.
But what about measuring actual skills or performance? Like, if you want to know if someone is actually good at something, the text details two distinct structural approaches, right? Norm reference tests and criterion reference tests.
Yes, and understanding the difference between these two explains so much about how our society measures success.
Okay, here.
The structure of a test dictates its ultimate purpose. Norm reference tests are fundamentally designed to facilitate comparison between people.
Let's test this with an analogy from the listener. This is basically the exact difference between taking the SATs and taking your driving test at the DMV.
That is a fantastic analogy.
Right, because the SAT is the ultimate norm reference test. The entire mechanism of the SAT is to grade you on a curve and compare you to the group. They want to figure out if you are in the 90th percentile of test takers or the 50th percentile.
And to achieve that spread, they intentionally design incredibly difficult questions that they know most people will fail purely to identify that elite top tier.
The purpose is ranking.
Now, compare that mechanism to the driving test.
The DMV does not care about your percentile at all. They do not care if you are the absolute best, most elegant parallel parker in your city.
No, they don't.
They are using a criterion reference test. They have a strict, predetermined checklist of criteria you must master. Did you use your turn signal? Did you stop completely at the red light? Did you parallel park without hitting the orange cone?
If you master the criteria, you pass.
Yeah, and if every single person in the state masters the criteria, everyone passes. There's no curve.
A researcher must consciously decide which of those mechanisms serves their study. Are they trying to rank a population to find the outliers, or are they trying to verify if a population has simply acquired a baseline skill?
Right. So we've defined our concepts, operationalize them into variables, mathematically categorize them, dodge the spiteful control groups and the placebo effects, and utilize reverse scoring and the right performance tests.
You've done a lot.
We finally have a massive pile of clean data. But what does it actually prove? Because the text takes a sharp, highly philosophical turn here regarding how scientists actually view their own findings.
It dives right into the philosophy of science. Culturally, we tend to think that scientists run experiments to prove their theories right. We view science as a quest for confirming evidence.
Which makes sense logically, right?
It does, but the counterintuitive truth of the scientific method is that it is built almost entirely on trying to prove things wrong. This is the principle of falsification.
And the book uses the famous black swan thought experiment to explain this.
Yes.
If you were a biologist, you could travel the globe and document 100 white swans. You could document 1,000 white swans. You could gather 1,000,000 data points of white swans and formulate a grand theory. All swans are white.
But you haven't actually proven it, have you?
You haven't, because you have not observed every single swan that exists or ever will exist in the universe. The mechanism of logic dictates that you cannot prove a universal truth with absolute, undeniable certainty.
However, what happens if you travel to Australia and observe just one single black swan?
Your grand theory is instantly destroyed. 1,000,000 white swans couldn't prove the theory perfectly right, but one single black swan proves it 100% false.
And that asymmetry is the heart of quantitative research. The most rigorous scientific method does not search for confirming evidence because human cognitive bias is so strong that we will always find evidence to support what we want to believe.
We see what we want to see.
Exactly. So instead, rigorous science actively searches for disconfirming evidence. You build your theory, and then you try as hard as you can to break it.
To bring this back to the listener, think about how our justice system works. When someone goes on trial, the baseline assumption is innocent until proven guilty. The prosecution doesn't just casually suggest the person might be guilty. They have to present evidence so overwhelmingly strong that the jury has literally no choice but to reject the assumption of innocence.
That's right.
And in science, that concept of innocent until proven guilty is called the null hypothesis.
That is a phenomenal way to contextualize it. The null hypothesis is the default position in any study. It is the baseline assumption that nothing is going on.
So if you are testing a brand new, expensive teaching method, the null hypothesis mathematically states that there is absolutely no difference between your new method and the old method.
Right. Any minor variation you see in the test scores is just assumed to be random luck.
So wait, what does this all mean? Scientists don't even set out to prove their own theories right. They just try to prove the no-effect theory is wrong.
It is a deliberate, brain-twisting double negative. You are literally rejecting the idea of nothingness.
That is so wild to think about.
And while that can be incredibly frustrating for beginning researchers to wrap their heads around, this cautious, skeptical mechanism is the absolute bedrock of scientific truth.
It's like a structural defense against human hubris.
Exactly. We inherently want to find patterns, and we desperately want our brilliant ideas to be correct. By forcing researchers to assume they are wrong from the start, and making them clear a massive statistical hurdle just to reject the idea that nothing happened, the scientific method protects itself from subjective wishful thinking.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap the sheer scope of this journey for you guys. We started with the realization that human reality is just too messy to measure. To fix that, we take an abstract concept and operationalize it into a concrete variable.
We establish our independent variable, the predictor, and measure its impact on the dependent variable, the outcome.
And along the way, we must constantly defend the data against confounding variables. We have to account for the Hawthorne effect, where people type faster just because the boss is watching.
And demand characteristics, where participants turn into people pleasers trying to confirm our bias.
We deploy tools like Likert scales with sneaky reverse-scored questions to catch people on autopilot. And we meticulously choose between norm reference tests that rank us against each other and criterion reference tests that measure true mastery.
Finally, we subject all of that hard-earned data to the ultimate philosophical test, the principle of falsification.
We abandon the desire to prove ourselves right and instead embark on the relentless quest to reject the null hypothesis, constantly trying to prove that nothing is going on is mathematically incorrect.
It fundamentally changes the way you look at the world, doesn't it?
It really does. It takes an unbelievable amount of invisible structural work to turn the chaos of human life into a neat little spreadsheet.
It is a monumental task. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder, returning to the very first step we discussed.
Operationalization.
Right. Every single day, you are bombarded by news articles, social media algorithms, and advertisements claiming that a new study proves a bold trend about human behavior.
Study proves coffee makes you happier.
Exactly. But knowing what you know now about the mechanics of operationalization, the next time you see a flashy headline, stop and ask yourself, how exactly did they define and measure that concept?
Because as we saw with the research on black male college students,
Whoever controls the definition of the variable ultimately controls the reality of the results.